out of the Great Depression, who fought at home and abroad in World War II, who came home and raised families, started businesses large and small. In their spare time, they built dams, highways, and universities. And they never looked back. They looked only ahead at what they would leave for the next generation. Now, they exemplified for us what I consider to be the greatness of the American spirit. This morning, we're going to hear from one of these men whose service in World War II, his love for family, country, and God, and his whole life shows that clearly he belongs in the greatest generation. Marty Wrightson will now introduce Frank Mori.
It's a real honor and privilege for me to introduce my dear friend, Frank Mori. He's smaller than me, but he's a we were talking this morning. Frank was born here in 1920. Can you imagine how Santa Barbara looked in 1920? He's a native Santa Barbaran, and he's been married to the same woman, Miss Al, for 67 years. He has 4 children, 7 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren, and a lot of the Mori family are here. So all of you Moris and in-laws married in, raise your hand so we can recognize you. There's a bunch of them here today. Thank you guys for being here. And he and his family owned and ran Katashi Nursery from 1964 to 1999. And Frank served on the intelligence team attached to the 77th Infantry and was noted in a history book as the first Japanese American to set foot on Japanese soil. He's my brother and friend and a man who knows how to cultivate plants and relationships. Would you welcome Mr. Frank Mori?
Good morning, Americans.
Good morning.
I'm very privileged to be asked to be one of the speakers. I want to open by expressing a thought. There was an experience that made me realize that true red American blood flowed through my veins. My father sent me on a trip to Japan, partially to make me realize, I guess my heritage as connect to his generation coming from Japan. And I traveled through Japan, occupied China, and during that trip, my little group was under suspicion by the Japanese MPs and all these stations, railroad stations. Here they see a group of 10 or 12 men that composed this group, and we were always under suspicion. We were not Japanese, we were foreigners. And after this trip ended in the Orient, coming home on the ship, bow of the ship, as we approached the American coast, someone yelled, "There's the Golden Gate Bridge." So I looked out in the distance, way in the horizon, you could see the span of the Golden Gate Bridge. And tears came to my eyes. Oh, I'm a true American with a red American blood flowing through my veins. So I'm very happy to be here to express some thoughts.
Thought we do this in an interview form. So, Frank, one of the questions I have, and I think it's a really critical one, particularly for us on the West Coast, part of your story is that you were sent to the internment camps along with thousands of other Japanese Americans, and then you served in the armed forces. How have you dealt with what many have viewed as a great injustice?
Yes, it was a great injustice. But I approach it with forgiveness because I realized as I lived on the Mesa and we were all under suspicion, thinking that America was going to be invaded, that people were in a panic. You have to live through the days to realize that it was just panic and hysteria that drove U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt to sign this order, ordering all Japanese Americans and Japanese living along the Pacific coast. So I don't greet it with bitterness, but I have forgiven everything that took place. Well, the internment was 3 years, the duration of the war. But in 7 months, I volunteered into the U.S. Army.
Just one last question. Tell us one story of your time in combat that really stands out, that speaks to us today.
Well, of course, there's many. But let me express one. It was what I saw with my own eyes. We landed. Well, first of all, let me explain. My 77th Division was the first U.S. division activated from the draft. And they were the members of the unit. They were generally just a few years older than I was, and with highly trained. And this was one of the landings was on Philippines. We were called after our Guam operation, and we were on the beach. I had landed, and I was perhaps 100 yards offshore, and a Japanese plane was, I think, just reconnoitering, just checking things out, and dove down to the beach. And as he banked and went up, I saw this big red ball that's painted on the underside of the wings. Now that was a scary sight. But I think the one of my bad experiences, worst experiences, was we were under artillery fire, and that was when I thought that the fire that was going to come was going to be the last day of my life on this earth, because there was the mountains back just like this, and the artillery was trying to zero in on us, and first the shells hit the water, and then came closer and closer, and so we would just get tense, each time it explodes, and one hit close by, and the two fellows, one with a machine gun, blown out of their hole, and then says the next one is going to get me, and so you're just waiting for that next one, but that never came. This is why I'm still here today.
Thank you, Frank. What a blessing to be your friend and to be here together today. Thank you, guys.